I just listened to every album by the band Blue Cheer, and here are my thoughts. So Blue Cheer is a heavy blues band slash classic rock band. And going into it, I knew literally nothing about them, not even a single song. I remember forums or articles where the subject would be what was the first heavy metal song, and as part of those conversations, a lot of people would mention Blue Cheer's cover of Summertime Blues, which is the first song on their first album. So this first album, I think it's pronounced Vincebus Eruptum. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's in Latin. The title, not the album. It would be badass if the whole album was in Latin, though. This whole album is done in this very heavy blues style, and I can see why people point to this album as being important to the formation of what we now know as heavy metal. Being in 1968, I could totally see how this is among the heaviest music that was around, and when people list Summertime Blues as being possibly the first heavy metal song, it's usually along with, say like Helter Skelter by the Beatles or A Whole Lotta Love by Led Zeppelin. Some people say this album is their best. I personally think it's their second best, so it's a great place to get started. I really enjoyed pretty much every song on it. It was all good, but Summertime Blues and Parchment Farm got my attention especially. In the same year, they release Outside Inside, which mainly still follows this very heavy blues sound, but introduces some more psychedelic elements to it, including in songs like Sun Cycle, which might be my personal favorite from this album. Then in 1969, they released two albums, one shortly after the other. The first of these was called New Improved. This ended up being my favorite Blue Cheer album, not just for its strength all the way through, but also for, there were two songs that I just loved, and they might be my two favorite Blue Cheer songs, and those are Peace of Mind and Fruits and Iceberg. Peace of Mind especially. This is without a doubt my favorite song by the band. It is more of a ballad. It's very somber and sad and just excellent. I'll be sure definitely to include it at the end of this video. Then the fourth album is self-titled, just called Blue Cheer. The sound of this album is pretty noticeably different in that it is definitely an attempt to be more radio friendly. So the songs are a bit more upbeat, they're a lot more fun, they are more mainstream bluesy as opposed to something that's a bit heavier and darker like they were doing in their previous three albums. Gotta hand it to them though, this album was also just packed full of really fun, really good songs that I would love to just put on the car and go on a road trip. So some of those like Hello LA, Bye Bye Birmingham, or Saturday Freedom were kind of the pinnacle of that. In 1970, they released The Original Human Being, and this is the first album by them that I run into that I didn't really love as a whole album. It had one song on it that I kept. I added it onto my playlist, but there wasn't much else on it that really stuck with me. But they really bring it back with Oh Pleasant Hope, which was released in 1971. This album leans a little bit more into a kind of hippie style and has several songs that I really loved. Highwayman, Believer, and I'm the Light being the top ones of these, but it worked as a whole album. It was good. And this was pretty much the end of their really great albums, or their really amazing albums. Everything after this, I was very choosy about. I had to cherry pick very specific songs to keep and to add on to my playlist, rather than viewing these albums positively as entire albums. It's a long time before they release anything again anyway, but in 1984 they released The Beast Is Back, which includes several re-recorded hits, including Summertime Blues and Parchment Farm and a few others from their earlier albums. Obviously trying to just increase album sales, cashing in on their previous success. It also includes several new recorded songs. Of these new songs, Heart of the City is the clear winner, the one that outshined everything else on the album. They put a lot of work into its energy and into its guitar solos. This was a fun one. So next they release Highlights and Lowlives, which, one of the main things I noticed about this album is that it could do with some better recording quality. I thought that the vocals were a bit buried into the mix here, but still had a couple of good songs. Urban Soldiers was one that stood out to me the most, I believe. Then they released Dining with Sharks, which I don't even remember at all. It wasn't even that long ago that I listened to it, but this album just had nothing really of value to me. If you feel differently, then that's fine. This is just my opinion. They released What Doesn't Kill You in 2007. This album comes back with a little bit more of a punch. They re-recorded one song from an earlier album, and then they had covered another one. But this album had two songs that I enjoyed, that I added onto my playlist. Rollin' Dem Bones is probably the one off this album that stood out to me the most, that I think is worth most checking out. Now, that was the last album that was recorded by the band. It was not the last album that was released, though. Back in 1978, they had recorded an album and then tabled it. Didn't release it until 2012. This was intended to be their 7th studio album, so the album was just called 7. They once again re-record Summertime Blues for this album. This has got to be the 3rd or 4th time that they do. They also cover Route 66, joining I don't know how many classic rock bands that have covered that song. As an album, though, this did work. It was kind of a nice treat to end the band on, because at the end of going through albums like Highlights and Lowlives and Dining with the Sharks and whatnot, this was a clear reminder of who they were in the 70s with their original lineup. And that's pretty much it for Blue Cheer. There will be my album ranking. So from spots 1 to 5, starting with New, Improved, and then all the way down to Oh Pleasant Hope, those are really good albums, like noticeably good. If you are a fan of rock, a fan of classic rock, a fan of blues, and you don't really know these albums very well, these are albums that I really would encourage you to check out. Spot 6, The Original Human Being, is good enough as an album. If you're looking for, if you know the first 5 and you're looking for the next thing to check out, that would be the next. And then everything after that, I would say, only check those out if you're as obsessive a completionist as I am. Otherwise, just check out the specific best songs that I had called out before. But thank you for listening, and here are all my favorite songs.